Hi everyone, this is a general overview of APA and we're going to go through the manual just kind of step by step through the chapters and some common aspects that may trip students up to kind of give you some tips to be successful. So as we get started, let's go ahead and go through our objectives. We're really going to look at mastering APA format and hopefully reducing some frustrations possibly that may occur because the APA format is not fully intuitive, and I just want to give you some tips that will help you as you move forward. So first of all, as we start from the get-go in the book itself, in Chapter 1, we're looking at those ethical considerations. We're looking at determining who the author is. Key components to be concerned about are plagiarism and self-plagiarism. So you want to make sure that you're citing all your resources appropriately, as well as not going back to something that you've already completed, even in your coursework, and using that material forward unless you have explicit permission from your particular faculty member to build upon previous work. So again, keep that in mind as you're doing your assignments, that each assignment is unique and needs to be unique, and avoid that self-plagiarism piece that you can't just pull information from one assignment and put it in another. So also in making data available, if you do research studies, that data needs to be available so folks have the opportunity to actually check what you have and what you've stated about that data to make sure that it is indeed accurate. So when we move on to chapter number 2, we're looking at the different parts of a manuscript. So we're starting out with the title and then the author's name and then the affiliation with the particular organization. So that's on the title page, and then also on that title page at the very top, that's where you're going to have your running head, and the words running head are in small letters, and then the title is in all capital letters when you're doing the running head. And the running head is different on page 1 than it is on the remainder of the pages. On the remainder of the pages, it's all caps, no words running head, and it's your abbreviated title or your title in all caps from pages 2 on. On the first page, it has the words running head with all caps, your title. So in moving forward, in chapter 2, there are some sample papers, and that's very helpful to take a look at those papers and kind of gauge how you're formatting yours, as well to make sure it's congruent with what the recommendations are. And also it has some examples for reference pages and appendices. So just always remember that the appendix papers are the pages go behind the reference pages. So always keep that in mind. So you have your title page or your cover page, you have the body of the content of your paper, followed by the reference list, and then the appendices follows the reference page. And then in chapter 3, we're really talking about the word choice and how we write. So we want to make sure that we're clear and concise using formal language. Just a real quick example, we're going to use words such as examine versus look at. So think about how you normally speak, and it's typically not how you normally speak as far as the word choice in formal scientific papers. It's not warm, it's very clear, very concise, and direct. So you don't want to add extra words, and you want to make sure that the tone is very professional and that it gets to the point and clearly relates to your subject matter. So with that being said, you want to avoid any kind of pronouns that may be unclear to the reader, such as this, that, these, those, it. Sometimes you know what it actually means, but the reader may not follow your train of thought. So always use the subject very directly and make sure that it's very clear what indeed you are referring to as you're writing your paper. And also you want to reduce any kind of bias in the language. You want to make sure, again, that it's very objective language that you're using, not passing judgment on good, bad, indifferent, or if using explicit terms such as huge. We want to have specific numerals to delineate sizes rather than using our personal judgment on the size or the magnitude of a particular opportunity or statement. So with that being said, you always want to use correct grammar. You want to make sure that your subjects and your verbs agree. If you're using plural, you want to use plural. If you're using singular, you want to use singular. And also avoid using misplaced modifiers. So as we move on to chapter number 4, we want to also examine the punctuation, parentheses, use of brackets within parentheses. When you're using citations that may include the name of a formal organization and then you want to use an abbreviation, then you would use brackets within parentheses. You never use parentheses within parentheses, just kind of a tip moving forward. And chapter 4 also goes into use of statistics and how to display those in papers, table formatting, labeling of tables, the use of hyphen, capitalization. So chapter 4 really gets into the nitty-gritty of how to write specific things and how to display that in your paper. And also be very careful when you're looking at numbers, and typically numbers under 10 are written out in word format. Numbers above 10 or above are written in numeral format, and that's kind of a general rule. So please take a look at that section. That tends to trip students up quite a bit. In chapter 4, it goes into the presentation of data and formatting for tables and figures, and we're not really going to dive into that a whole lot, but that information is there. And in chapter 6, this is a section that you really want to focus on, and this is about citations and making sure that the citations are appropriate, how to use quotes, and I do want to just recommend that you avoid using extensive quotes, and also that you need to be very careful on how you paraphrase things so that you're not getting too close to what the original author used, because you want to make sure to take the concepts and include your own language to display those concepts as you're relaying in your paper. So again, with the quotations, you should only use quotations when you can't say it any better yourself. And then also diving into the very specific components of the references and groups as authors, 2 or more works in the same parentheses. And this is something that you will be doing quite a bit, is actually there may be more than one author, and there should be really more than one author that kind of says the same content. So you can actually make a statement such as the sky is blue, and then in parentheses you can include all the authors that said that the sky was blue, and you just separate the authors by a semicolon, and you just list all the authors that you found in the literature that say the same thing, so to speak. And this really shows the strength of the proof that you have, or the support that you have for your particular statement. So again, this shows the strength of the evidence by having more than one author saying the same information. So as we're moving on to chapter 7, this is a chapter that you will use quite extensively, and there's examples of all kinds of references for your reference list. So do tab that in your book and use that very frequently. So with that being said, these are some of the most common used pages in the 6th edition of APA. So the page numbers may change just a wee bit with the new book coming out, but just kind of know these are the areas that you will be using quite a bit. And then this is just an example of the 3 most used types of references in papers, and that includes books, websites, and journals. So this gives you an example of how you will be citing those. In addition, some of the most common errors that we see includes capitalization in titles, and it's really important that you only capitalize the first word in a title or any proper noun within a title, or if there's a semicolon or colon or some sort of punctuation in a title, then you capitalize the first word following that punctuation. So there are some unique rules for that, but it's kind of counterintuitive to what we typically do when we cite titles, because we don't, in APA format, you don't use capitalization for each word in a title, whether that title would be for a journal article or the title of a book. So kind of keep that in mind. And also there are some guidelines for citing references with more than 7 authors, and if that is indeed the case, then there's a process to actually shorten the number of authors, and that's included in your reference list, and you can refer to that. Okay, as far as citations, again, this is in the 6th edition. You want to look at page 177. This will help you when you're doing your in-text citations, and this is an overview of those particular citations. Sometimes the first citation differs from the subsequent citations depending on the number of authors that are in that particular reference. So these are examples to help clarify those rules that's in the 6th edition. And again, the next edition is going to be a little simpler, so we'll transfer to that as well. So when we're looking at in-text citations, these are the most common errors, and when we're using the et al. Format, we want to make sure that we put the period behind the al, then a comma, then the date. And there are a number of varying ways that I see it in papers, but that's the format for the et al. Citation. And also in citing the authors, if you are going to a website, you want to probably use the organization that sponsors the website, and that's the case for most of the government websites. It may be like the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, may be the author, or like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, may be an author. So just kind of keep that in mind that you may not have names as authors, it may be an organization, so you want to take a look at that. And then just kind of overall general tips, just as a recap, you want to always use past tense when you're referring to the literature, and you want to avoid attributing human behavior to a study. Like a study cannot find, the authors can, but the study cannot find. So that's just an example. Use clear and concise language, avoid extra words or flowery language. This is not real creative writing. It's really clear and concise. Always use New Times Roman font when you're doing your papers. And you want to, believe it or not, avoid templates. Very often the templates are not fully consistent with APA formatting, so it's really important to adhere to the formatting based on APA. And here are some additional resources. Always use the APA manual. If you need additional information, the best resources is Purdue OWL or going to the Writing Center. And then just in conclusion, it's not the easiest thing to do APA, but you will learn it and we will help guide you through it. But use that manual, that will help you so much. And there's the reference. So thank you so much. Take care now.